We're ready.
Okay, so it's 1:30. We are going to get started with our webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Maricela Trejo, and today we're going to talk about the Preschool Initiative Consortium webinar on stress and anxiety, adverse childhood experiences, and positive influence. We're glad you're here today with us. I'm the coordinator for Region 2 Migrant Education Program for the Georgia Department of Education. And co-presenting with me is Lisandra Alexander from Pennsylvania Department of Education. So let's get started. The Preschool Initiative is a consortium incentive grant, and this grant is authorized under the Section 1308 of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and which was reauthorized under the No Child Left Behind, also known as the ESSA. The purpose of the consortium incentive grants is to promote the interstate coordination among migrant education programs nationwide. Through these competitive incentive grants are awarded to the SEAs to improve the delivery of services to migratory children and youth whose education has been interrupted. Just to also let you know that Pennsylvania is the consortium's lead state with Ms. Carmen Medina, who is also the state director. The member states for the Preschool Consortium is Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Maine, Missouri, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Washington. We also have partner states that include Alaska, Hawaii, Indiana, Montana, and North Carolina. Ms. Michelle Shaney serves as the Preschool Initiative Coordinator. The Preschool Initiative Consortium grant goals are to expand the capacity of the state and local migrant education programs to serve migrant preschool children. It's also to ensure that more services are provided to migrant 3 to 5-year-old children. And we also want to disseminate information on evidence-based and promising practices. Our session goals for today, we are going to discuss the 3 categories of stress and its impact on the brain. Adverse childhood experiences, or also known as ACEs, will be introduced and defined. In addition, we will also identify the effects of stress and anxiety on children's brain development. We will also introduce and explore an optional activity called the brain architecture game. We will learn how positive influences and resiliency can counteract stress and trauma. The slides and the recording will be emailed after the webinar and will be posted to the clearinghouse. Because this is a recording, your video and audio are muted. There are several pauses during today's presentation which will allow you for questions and comments. Type in the chat box.
The Center on the Developing Child identifies 3 categories of stress: positive, tolerable, and toxic. Positive stress is normal and part of healthy development. Examples of positive stress include the first day of school, or with a new caregiver, or getting an immunization shot in the arm. Children could experience a slight increase in heart rate and stress hormone levels. Tolerable stress is more severe and presents longer-lasting difficulties. Examples of tolerable stress include experiences a natural disaster like a hurricane or a flood, or going through the loss of a loved one. The stress may be categorized as tolerable if there is an adult support to assist the child and help him or her adapt. Stressful situations may be categorized as tolerable when they can be mitigated by adults and children are nurtured and supported. Toxic stress occurs when there is strong, frequent, or prolonged adversity. Examples include chronic abuse, exposure to violence, and family economic hardship. When children experience prolonged adversity without adult support and positive changes, their brain development is disrupted. This can result in stress-related disease or cognitive impairment. As we said, Toxic stress can impede the brain's development and lead to long-term mental health and physical health issues. Toxic stress can delay or prevent the brain's ability to build circuits or connections that allow different regions of the brain to communicate and process information. If those circuits are weak, the development of the executive function needed to regulate behavioral and impulse control, which also allows children to focus and follow directions, can be hindered. According to the Haysher report, although negative life experiences and stress can be present in homes at all income levels, experts say that extra stressors like food and housing insecurity and violence in the community can greatly impact development and are often present to a greater degree in low-income homes. Children who live in poverty are especially vulnerable because their families frequently face daily stressors, said the director, Shokunov of Harvard University Centers for the Developing Child. That stress interferes with a parent's ability to be consistently responsible for their children and to provide a pretty predictable, well-regulated, low-stress environment day by day. Shonkov said, research shows social emotional development, language development, and brain structure can be impacted by the effects of poverty. These changes are also pronounced. It's even possible to see them on brain scans. A 2015 study that examined the brains of 1,099 children and young adults found that those who kept come from higher income homes and had their parents with higher educational attainment had larger surface areas in their brain, especially in those areas that control language and executive functioning that their peers are poorer and have less educated parents. So I'm going to show you a video now about this resource, the Brain Architecture Game. Here we go, I'm sorry. Can everybody hear it okay? Michelle?
These ordinary people are building brains. It takes a little bit of skill, a little bit of luck, and a lot of teamwork. As you build a brain, you're going to learn how environments, experiences, and genes act together to shape brain development. Ready? It's the Brain Architecture Game. Before we start playing, let's learn some brain science. To help with that, we'll need a scientist.
Our topic today is the brain. We often think of the brain as just one thing, but really, it's like a lot of little brains, all inside one organ. Just like a house with many rooms, each room has a different function. Brain cells are the building material. What happens is that experiences you have cause brain cells to connect together, like a house that's getting wired up. Basic sensory abilities like vision and hearing are the first to get wired up, and these act like a foundation for other abilities to be built on. As you age, the right experiences build new rooms. You learn how to walk and talk, and eventually how to do more complex things like arithmetic and planning and reasoning. These last rooms are still getting wired up in your teens and beyond, and that's great news because it means that parents, teachers, coaches, and all of us who spend time with kids can influence the development of these abilities right into a person's 20s. but it's all built on the foundation that began in the earliest years.
So, what's going on inside the brain that causes certain abilities to develop in some people and not in others?
This is where experiences really matter. Genes provide the basic instructions to tell cells to connect to each other, but it's experiences, like all that time spent on peekaboo, learning to read, or just playing together, that cause certain circuits to be wired and strengthened during development. Wiring that's used less does not become as strong, and it gets pruned away. So it's up to caregivers and communities to make sure young people have positive brain-building experiences at all ages of their development. Of course, not all kinds of experiences are helpful. Really bad experiences that are intense, frequent, or prolonged, like violence, ongoing neglect, cause stress that's so serious it can have a toxic effect on brain development. A brain experiencing toxic stress will have weaker architecture, and that can lead to a whole range of problems later in life. Sometimes we have experiences that could turn toxic for the brain or not, depending on who's around to give support. Imagine a tragedy like death of a parent. A child left to grieve without adult support will suffer severe stress that lasts a long time. But if caring adults work with the child to soothe the body's stress response and teach coping skills, the experience won't be toxic for the brain. When caregivers prevent severe stress experiences from turning toxic, scientists call it tolerable stress. So, communities and caregivers are very important, whether they're actively encouraging healthy brain development or working to prevent toxic stress from harming the brain. These interventions are very important for the long-term health and well-being of both individuals and the community as a whole. That last point is what I want you to think about when you play the brain architecture game, because as you'll learn soon enough, brains don't build themselves. It's group work, so get all the help you can and go build some brains.
Okay, so let's go back to the PowerPoint. So this is an optional resource. There is a fee involved with it. The Brain Architecture game is a tabletop game experience that builds understanding of the powerful role of experiences on early brain development, what promotes it and what derails it, with what consequences to society. It explores the relationship between toxic stress, positive influences, and brain development. The goal is to build a brain as tall as possible. And for more information, you can just Google the Brain Architecture game, or you will receive this PowerPoint. So in the resources is there. It's not a big cost. You can actually build it yourself after getting a license. So I would definitely recommend looking into that. It's in Spanish and English, and it would be good for the parents as well to play this game. So any questions or comments so far? Please type them in the chat box.
I just want to know, has anyone used the brain architecture game before, either during professional development or with families in some capacity?
Are you asking the audience?
I'm asking the audience, but feel free to, I know you have, Lysandra.
Yes. Yeah, I've used it for professional development 3 times, I think. I travel with it. And people really get into it. It's a really good way to learn how those experiences can affect the brain development, from our genes all the way up to what kind of things we're exposed to.
Mhm. And I know we've used it with at one of the preschool initiative team meetings, and it was really insightful to see how something can really toggle between the toxic or the tolerable stress categories. You know, so it could have long-term ill effects, but with the right support, those can be mitigated. So really, a really fun game, and I strongly encourage folks, as Lysandra did, to take part and play and get a copy of it if you can do that.
Yeah,
It
like
looks
I
like
said, they do send you can buy the packet made, but it's so easy just to make them yourself, and there's no limit on how many you can make.
It doesn't look like there are any other questions, but a good number of folks have used it. And of course, what we're really focusing on here is how positive influences, and those will happen through the migrant program and service providers or advocates, recruiters, can really have dramatic effects on the children and their families, and help move things that could be toxic stressors into that tolerable category so their brains can continue to grow and develop. So with that, Lysandra, I'll turn it back over to you and Maricela.
Great. So as you have heard of ACEs when talking or reading about stress and anxiety, again, the ACEs stands for the Adverse Childhood Experiences. So today, that's what we'll be discussing, how these prolonged adverse experiences create toxic stress, which can negatively impact the brain development of children. There's an ACEs test that we will also take a look at as we think about children who have experienced express. On the ACEs test, having a score of 4 or more has been linked to developing alcoholism, drug abuse, depression, and chronic illness in adulthood. So again, we provided you the link there as well so that you can look more into the ACEs. And this is just a sample of the test. Again, this is a questionnaire, and it's a tally of different types of abuse, neglect, and other hallmarks of the rough childhood before a person's 18th birthday. Obviously, the rougher the childhood that they have, the higher the score will be on this questionnaire. So a score of 4 or more on the ACEs test will increase the risk of the mental and physical negative outcomes for the child. Specifically, the likelihood of a chronic pulmonary lung disease increases by 390%. For hepatitis, it increases 240%. For depression, it increases 460%. And for suicide, it increases 1,220%. So, however, today we will discuss ways that you can mitigate the impact, and especially with supportive relationships.
Maricela, can you read just a couple of those questions from the ACEs? They're a little hard to read since the slide is, so small. And I know folks can look up the test themselves online and they'll get a copy of the PowerPoint afterwards, but just to give some of the audience an idea of what types of questions are on there.
Sure.
Do you have it there, Maricela, or?
I have it here. Just give me a minute. Yeah. So number 1, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? Number 2, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, or even hit you as hard that you had marks or were injured? So again, these are just some sample questions that are included in this ACE test.
Thank you.
Yeah, and they're all, if you have a just, then you would put a 1, and that's how you calculate, if you have 4 or more, then there's that risk there.
So ACEs are put into 3 categories or to 3 buckets. These include abuse, neglect, and family and household challenges. These challenges such as mental health, divorce, or substance abuse. And obviously children who experience multiple adverse experiences may later develop problems like drug and alcohol abuse, as mentioned before, or depression as well.
So we have just discussed the types of ACEs. So let's now dig a little deeper. The ACEs types are all on the surface. However, we also need to look at what are the root causes that put children at risk of ACEs. They have to do with the environment, specifically the communities where children grow up with, as well as circumstances. So some of these are poverty, discrimination, community disruption, lack of opportunity, economic mobility, and social capital, poor housing quality and affordability, and violence. So ACEs, over 45% of US children and 2/3 of adults have been exposed to at least one adverse childhood experience, such as physical or emotional neglect or abuse, living with someone with a drug, alcohol, or serious mental health problem, or the death of a parent, and being exposed to violence or discrimination in the home or community. Over 1 in 5 children have 2 or more ACEs where large impacts can be seen. So as you can see, it's pretty pervasive. Breakthrough in neurobiological sciences explains mechanisms linking ACEs exposure levels to markedly higher rates of chronic physical illness, like mental and emotional and behavioral health problems, and lower ability on quality of life and life expectancy. This graphic is from the CDC. It illustrates the lasting impacts of ACEs. Areas of impact are injury, mental health, maternal health, infectious diseases such as STDs, chronic diseases such as cancer and diabetes, risky behaviors such as drug and alcohol abuse, and opportunities such as educational attainment. These are some specific examples of what our migratory children might experience that can cause long-term stress. I would like to invite you to type in the chat any other reasons that, specifically to migrant children and ACEs. What are some things we know, for example, that they might live in poverty, homelessness, things of that sort. So I invited to type in the chat what are some prolonged adverse experiences in your experiences as your student face.
It looks like a couple of people are chatting, and Rachel from North Carolina talks a little bit about COVID and living together, being together, the fear of exposure. That is something that is most definitely happening. We see them in farms and in the different processing plants, just the folks being together in close proximity.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah,
thanks for going first, Rachel.
Very relevant to these times, for sure.
It looks like a couple of people are typing, so if you want to, we'll wait just.
Yeah, wait a little bit. Mm-hmm.
And so Marianela talks about just the movement because of changes in schools, as the migratory families change locations and the kiddos have to change schools. That can be very stressful, especially now with remote learning and trying to figure out what's happening with schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a traumatic time for everyone, and you can only imagine what it does to children.
All right, if other ideas pop up, feel free to continue to type them in the chat room. And I know we'll take a look at the positive influences, and maybe we can use these 2 examples and incorporate them into our positive influences, because we know that what those service providers can do really on some level can help the kids and the families and keep some of the stressors from becoming toxic and keep them in the tolerable category. So COVID and the schools. I'll turn it back over to you, Lysandra.
So
Yes,
yes,
Maddie.
positive influences. Now that we talked a little bit about ACEs, we're also going to spend some time exploring some ideas or different ways into where the migrant education program recruiters, advocates, or service providers might be able to support these young children and obviously help the children's mind and bodies develop. So research shows that the negative effects of stress and anxiety can be helped through positive influences. And these positive influences include those people who are very supportive, nurturing, and reliable in a child's life. That means that you, the migrant education program services providers, or recruiters or advocates, whatever your title may be, that you all can make a difference in these children. If you can advance the slide
Yeah, that's the slide.
to the next one. So there is hope. Children who experience very stressful situations can be helped by being by supportive individuals and responsive individuals like yourself. You may be that positive, supportive, responsive adult who listens, who smiles, provides resources, and makes referrals, and helps the child and the family build capacity to manage these difficult situations. Some of the strategies that you might want to consider is to be direct with the families and the children. Notice those positive behaviors, model and practice, good behaviors. If the children are exhibiting bad behaviors, you may want to model and practice what a good behavior looks like. Know when to be silent and just, model listening as well. According to the National Scientific Council of the Developing Child, the following are positive influences which make a difference in a child's life. These positive experiences, these provide a strong foundation for brain development, for social emotional development, and overall learning and just well-being. The nurturing and responsive environment and caregivers. These are the people around the child who respond to his or her needs in a loving, thoughtful, and supportive way. And also the language-rich environment. This is when people talk with the child, not at the child, but with the child. Examples can include adults when you're reading stories, sharing those engaging conversations with students. If you can advance the slide. And according to the National Scientific Council of the Developing Child, when parents, informal community programs, and professionally staffed early childhood services pay attention to young children's emotional and social needs, as well as to their mastery of literacy and cognitive skills, they have a maximum impact on the development of sturdy brain architecture and preparation for their success in school.
So there are a number of ways that parents, caregivers, teachers, and other service providers may be able to develop to help those children and youth who have experienced stress and mitigate the ill effects of stress and trauma. As mentioned earlier, supportive relationships really make a difference. So that means you. So there is definitely hope, like Marisela says. And these resiliency skills can be taught to our children. ACEs can be prevented, really, especially us working with young children. We just need to provide support to the parents and the communities where they live, where some of the root causes that were mentioned earlier. Some ways in which we can help are providing economic opportunities, providing parenting help, access to early childhood programs, and provides access to physical and mental health resources. So I'm going to pause here for any questions or comments.
So Sandra, it's Michelle. While folks are thinking about this, I just wanted to kind of loop back around to what Rachel from North Carolina had asked about or mentioned with regards to COVID. One of the things that we did, or that one of our PI states did, was send letters to every single migrant family in the state from the migrant program staff, asking them if they needed any assistance, if they had questions about what was happening with COVID, and if there were any immediate needs that were, you know, housing, food insecurity, things like that. And we know that the school districts also liaise with the families and do a really good job, but we just wanted to remind, or they wanted to remind families that the migrant program was thinking of them, especially, you know, because of their migratory status, and that they had this additional person or set of people to reach out to, this additional support system. And there were a lot of folks who reached out. One example was a group of families who were worried about food. So one of the staples of their diets is rice, and that's really important to them. And they had been to several of the local grocery stores that were completely sold out. And so the migrant liaison in that area was able to connect them with a restaurant that could order large bags of rice for them at cost from a restaurant supply company, a food supply company that restaurants use, and immediately was able to alleviate a worry that the family had about food insecurity. That was
Thanks, Michelle.
directly related to COVID too.
Yes, thanks, Michelle, for sharing that experience. Wow.
Did we get anything else in the chat, Michelle?
No, I don't see that anybody has typed any other questions in there or comments. Yep, go ahead.
So these are some strategies for building resiliency. Number one, we want to create a safe, predictable space for children where they feel comfortable and you know, especially that they feel safe. We want to build positive relationships and build a trusting bond with the children. You never know, you may be the only smiley face they see all day long. So keep that in mind. It's also important to understand big feelings and the challenging behaviors that children are experiencing. And also, you know, when given the opportunity, provide opportunities for mastery and success with the tasks that the children are given. You know, we don't want them to always be failing, but we want them to experience what is it, you know, that they can do that they can be successful. So keep those strategies in mind. So the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University presents this graphic on improving outcomes for children and families. This pretty much sums it all up. Take a minute to look over it. These are the 3 principles to improve outcomes for children and families. Number 1 is, you know, develop supportive, responsive relationships. This will promote healthy brain development. It will also mitigate the effect of a challenging experience and becoming toxic. And 2, strengthen life skills by managing life, work, and relationships. This includes the ability to focus, to plan for and achieve adapting to situations, this impulsive behaviors. These abilities are developed over time through practice and coaching, and an example of resiliency is zone and mindfulness activities. And then also the third one would be to reduce the source of stress for the child and family. You know, substance abuse and mental illness are all sources of stress for children and families. So we cannot change these ourselves, but we can teach children how to handle these stress and provide them with strategies to do so. The goal is to just have children that are healthy and can achieve academically.
Before we go into our conclusion, are there any final questions or comments?
Lisandra, if you back up to that last slide, I would just invite people to look at the different pieces of this and think about what you already do as migrant advocates or service providers, administrators in each of the different categories. So what contributions has the migrant program made or have you made personally to be able to reduce sources of stress for the families, like the example that I gave with the rice just a couple of minutes ago? Or what have you been able to do to support responsive relationships, strengthen core life skills, which you probably do on a day-to-day basis when you're working with the little ones on language and literacy. So if you want to type some ideas into the chat room about these 3 areas and what your migrant program already does, or let's say you're thinking of a gap area. Maybe there is something that your program can do to reduce the sources of stress, especially related to COVID, or the high mobility and trying to get into schools in different areas now with the mystery of, is it remote, is it face-to-face, is it a hybrid, where do I go, what do I do? So I'd love to see some ideas in the chat room. We'll give you all just a minute to process that.
Definitely, there's a lot. I know it's a big graphic, but it really summarizes and shows that not all is lost. I mean, there are things we can do to support the parents, to support the children, to make sure to make all of experiences with stress and trauma and kind of turning it around and showing, making that stress tolerable. And you know, it's not only you, it's the whole community, it's helping the parents help the child. Did we get anything else in the chat box, Michelle?
We don't have anything in the chat box.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we'll stay on a little bit longer if folks have questions that they want to ask. And there will be a part 2. You want to talk a little bit about what the next webinar is going to be in terms of relationship to this one?
The next one will provide some information on brain chemistry, as well as some books and mindfulness resources you can use with the children. So our colleague, Dr. Cynthia Justine, will do that one.
Thank you.
So we have been busy this summer making all kinds of presentations. So we're hoping to you to check out our clearinghouse. So the preschool initiative is pleased to share a series of webinars for service providers to increase awareness on different topics and to inform their work with migratory preschoolers. The presentations are migrant preschoolers in STEM, summer service, resources for the migratory preschoolers, promoting pre-K learning with arts, integrated strategies and parents, the 4-SIG collaboration, recruit resources to serve students, working with preschoolers, understanding those developmental milestones, and also family literacy strategies. And of course, this presentation will also live in that page. So we encourage you to go to the preschoolinitiative.org clearinghouse/presentations. There are a lot of additional resources that we found while preparing this. I have hyperlinked them all in this slide. So if you would like you will receive the PowerPoint, and it will also be posted in the website. So if you want to just go and explore different things, I will note that the GOSOSI consortium has some presentations and resources on ACEs, including a literature study that are really useful. But everything here, we have been talking about the Center for the Developing Child in Harvard. They have lots of great information there, as well as other resources that you can get linked to here. And there are also some sites that you can go to get professional development. All of these are excellent. They have webinars and resources on professional development on those topics that we have discussed today. And here I want to give you, we really want your input on how this session today went. So if you can take your phone out and hover your camera and your cell phone over the QR code, we'll give you a minute to fill that out. So just go get your phone with the camera. When you see something pop up at the top, you don't have to actually take a picture. You can just click on that and it will take you directly to the survey. So let's give you a little bit of time to do that. Michelle, you want to tell me when time is up?
Sure, we'll give them just a couple of minutes. And we do appreciate your feedback. Looks like a couple of folks are having trouble with the QR code. So I can send out the paper copy and also the SurveyMonkey link with the follow-up email. And we would just respectfully request it if you could take a minute. It's just a few simple short questions to go ahead and fill that out if you can't do it right now. Thank you very much. I'm sorry about that.
Should we move on, Michelle?
Yep. We have had some success. A couple of folks saying that it's worked, so good.
Well, it's been our pleasure to share all of these resources with you today. You can contact Michelle Cheney, our director, Marisela Trejo, my co-presenter today, if you have any questions. And we really thank you for your time and attention. And we'll stay here for a little bit in case you have other questions. Marisela?
I'm right here as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you joining us today and look forward to seeing you next time, where Cynthia will talk a little bit more about mindfulness strategies and provide some activities to do with the kids to help relieve that stress and anxiety they might be experiencing. And Lisandra, Marisela, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle, for helping, and we look forward to collaborating again.
And with that, you all can end the meeting at your side, and we'll stay here in case folks have any questions.
And Michelle, I'll go ahead and send Margarita the survey. She's the one who I think was not able to pull it up on her phone.
Thanks, Marisela.
You can stop the recording, Michelle.